He called it the House of Prayer, where from the shadows he directed a select few of its congregation to be fishers of men. Their job was to hook military veterans into an ambush that these men had no training for and could not defend themselves against. After luring them in under the guise of spiritual healing, promising them more wholeness than any hospital could ever give for wounds deeper than any combat injury, the ghost would then latch onto their veterans' benefits and suck the fund dry without them knowing a thing. He hatched an elaborate scheme supported by acts of abuse and unique doctrines that kept his followers bewitched. But on the 10th of February 2025, the FBI did something unheard of. They captured a phantom. During the raid of his $1.5 million estate, he was arrested for a 26-count indictment for bank and wire fraud as well as tax evasion. He will be facing this indictment alongside his co-defendants as the man who carried out one of the most elaborate military scams for over a decade. I'm just so excited to see you guys again. So I want you to pull up the covers, get comfy, get your snacks, get your drink, because we are going to dive deep and discuss the mysterious, nameless cult leader of the House of Prayer, his financial scam targeting military veterans, and the misgivings of his dark and mysterious cult. To really understand who we're dealing with, that is to understand the cult leader who ran this cult for over a decade, we need to know something very important about this individual, and that is that he is essentially nameless. In the indictment, they literally refer to him as FNU or LNU, which means first name unknown, last name unknown. So there's no concrete information about his past. This man literally appeared out of nowhere. It's as if someone picked him up, carried him across space and time, and just dropped him right in the center of America. Whatever we know about his past is from the FBI investigation, but this is based on inference and circumstantial evidence. So it's almost like if they were chasing the shadow through fog. However, the working theory by the FBI and by extension the prosecution is that his history and his past actually begins and ends with another man called Rony Denis. So Homeland Security testifies that the real Rony Denis was a man who fled Haiti from dictatorship and landed by boat in Miami in 1980. But in 1893, he reported that his immigration documents were stolen. He died in 1989. Now, something important to note is that this alien number was actually being used by 3 ghosts at the time, and these ghosts obviously would be people who don't have an identification of themselves and are living legally in the identity of this deceased person. So Rony Denis, after he had died in 1989, still had his person being represented in legal documents throughout the United States of America, and it was specifically by 3 people: the ghost/cult leader and 2 other unknown individuals. I have a theory. I believe that the deceased's identity being used simultaneously by 2 other people and the ghost is a sign of his character, his morals, and the people who he ran with and what he was all about, because I believe that many things could have happened. He could have stolen the documents himself and then passed on that information by selling it, of course, to 2 other people to either do his business, do business related to him, or to do their own thing, which means that he was essentially a key player in the black market, essentially, because back in the day, that was data farming, that was selling data, right? Or 2, he actually had connections where he could have gone to someone who had gotten the documents and they would have sold it to him and 2 other people. But all in all, that shows you that this man, long before he had started this abusive cult, he is showing tendencies of being inclined to do illicit and criminal activities. So the ghost joined the US Army, but his main goal was not to really represent his country or to fight for some ideology. His goal was actually to have this second phase of the plan. And it's almost as if he wanted to complete the steps that Rony Denis hadn't done during his life. And what does that mean is that his second and final stage, which he was aiming for, was neutralization. So remember, Rony Denis may not have been neutralized, or if he was, Rony Denis would not have had access to those documents, because the only document that he would have had would have been his alien number and social security number. But any neutralization documents may have occurred way later in life when the real Rony Denis had gotten married. So that was the second phase of the ghost's plan. He was going to use the dead man's identity, and he would try to slip through the cracks and become neutralized under that name. Well, that didn't work out. For whatever reason, that never happened. The government testifies in the indictment that Rony Denis missed the deadline. That's what they describe it as. And I suspect that it wasn't because he missed the deadline, because from what I'm getting, this man is super calculated. What I believe is that he checked in advance and he was monitoring. There could have been something in the neutralization process that spooked him, and he said he doesn't want to do it anymore lest they find out that he is not the person who he is pretending to be. The FBI has said before, like, they don't know his first name, they don't know his last name, they don't know where he's from. Or perhaps, theory, maybe he is a US citizen. Maybe he is, and he, for whatever reason, scrubbed his past and he wanted to assume a new identity. Maybe he just wants the government to think that he isn't from here. If you understand what I'm saying, because you realize that this man is really calculating. Like, I'm realizing that too. And I think that's one of the misconceptions that I had when I was reading this initially. I thought he was a foreigner, but that would be an assumption. Assumptions are really dangerous, especially when it comes to things like law enforcement. And I think that criminals and cult leaders, they rely a lot on assumptions. That's what I think. Because neutralization is one of the important parts of the ghost's plan. So he doesn't get neutralization through the military. However, that doesn't stop him. He met a young woman called Marjorie, and suddenly his plan was back on. I'm throwing this out there. I don't think that they randomly fell in love. I think he sought someone out specifically for his means. And so he's very calculated. So he found this young woman called Marjorie and he married her. And of course, once the marriage was complete, he was neutralized and he was now a United States citizen. Plan complete, right? Well, not exactly. You see, the ghost had another operation in mind. His intention would be to set up his own spiritual project. He wanted to be a pastor. He wanted to have his own church. And because we know how this individual appears to look thus far, it may not have had anything to do with the Bible. It may have simply just been to collect, if you know what I mean. So first he neutralizes himself again, but he neutralizes himself into another congregation. You see where this is going, right? There seems to be a theme here of blending in, then he strikes. So when Rony Davis had come into this New Testament Church of Christ and he had disguised himself as just, an ordinary going member of the congregation, won their trust. They looked at him as responsible. They looked at him like he knows what he's doing when it comes to the Bible. And they decide, I don't know how churches work. I don't know what was his secret, but he moved rapidly through the ranks of the New Testament Church of Christ. And overnight, he became a minister. And when he became a minister and people respected him and he got that authority, that was when he switched and he started whispering dissent for the leadership. And he turned at least 15 ministers that were alongside him in the New Testament Church of Christ away from that institution to come onto his side, to come onto the dark side. And they followed him because one of the things you will realize about this ghost is that he is very charismatic.
They just, the way he's so charismatic and so soft-spoken, and it's just part of the narcissism and the mind control that people just flock to him and they lifted him up to this pedestal where anything that he says, they think that he's just holy.
So he brainwashes these people, 15 ministers. Out of the blue, they up and they leave their church and they follow Rony Denis. They follow the ghost, and he moves them into his new organization, which was started almost a year after he swept the ministers from their old place of worship, which was NTCC. Now, New Testament Church of Christ, NTCC, he didn't only sweep ministers, he also swept a lot of the congregation members. And one of the congregation members said that she actually used to go to the NTCC, and she was there at the time when he brainwashed everyone. And she said, well, you know what? When he was there, he was just so charismatic. And what he did to turn people away from the NTCC was that he would basically talk about these new doctrines, and he would set himself up as the authority for God, but he poisoned the water and he made it seem like they were teaching bad doctrines. So the Phantom decides to open his church, and he opens this church in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, but then he moves the head location and he moves it to Hinesville, Georgia. So pause. Remember that he is a financial predator and he is going to scam military veterans. So he then goes to Hinesville and he plants his church directly in the vicinity of about 4 military bases. We have Fort Hood, we have Fort Gordon, we have Fort Stewart, Fort Bragg, and the Joint Base Lewis McCord. Imagine you're a soldier, you're a military man, probably National Guard, and you are in one of these forts, Fort Bragg, Fort Gordon, one of these forts where the Phantom has moved his headquarters to situate nearby. And you're having a cold beer, maybe you just finished to smoke your last cigarette, and you hear footsteps coming from behind you. You turn around and there standing in front of you would be a man. He has a tiny cross necklace. You look around and he doesn't seem like he came with anyone else. He says, how is your life going? Do you know that there's more for you in this life? Do you know that we can offer you healing and really improve your life and solve all of your problems? As a young guy, a young man, you would be a little suspicious. And you said, no thanks, I'm really good. But he insists. His eyes flash to the empty pack of cigarettes and the empty bottle of beer. He says, if you come with me, I'm going to promise you I'll buy you a pack of cigarettes, I'll buy you a beer, and then we could go to the church. Because he wants to take you off the fort. He wants to take you off of the base. And you're still suspicious because you're looking around to see if any of your sergeants are nearby, and you have at this point felt like this man has gotten official permission to be on the base. And so you decided a free pack of cigarettes, a beer, and breakfast, because he promised you breakfast. You say, you know what, what's the hold up? And you decide to leave with him. Well, he did stop by the gas station and he bought you a pack of cigarettes and your beer, and then you guys slow drive down this really dark road and you see a light. Your heart is racing because you think it's a bonfire. But then as you get closer, you realize it's a house. The driver rolls to a stop in front of it. You look around because this man promised to take you off the base, specifically to a church. You don't see a church, you see a house. But you don't think too much of it because you tell yourself, well, maybe this church is a home church. It happens in someone's house. And so you're expecting to see the church in maybe the living room. And so you enter through the kitchen, you pass through the living room, and it's dead silent until the man ushers you into the garage. You step into the garage. Of course, you're still in your military wear. You are greeted with 26 pairs of eyes. In this room, there are people standing, almost like they're waiting for you in front of these plastic chairs. All the chairs are full except for 2 chairs. It would almost seem as if it was specifically left for you and the man who brought you there. But you didn't think anything of it. There's a makeshift singer and he has the this janky plastic keyboard, and he's pressing it, and some automated hymns are playing, and people begin to sing. A pastor comes out. He has like slick back hair and really greasy big glasses and a really large jacket, and he comes out and he's breathing fire. He's, you know how those church people talk, like, you know, he's so powerful, he's full of fire, and he's talking about fire, he's talking about brimstone, and he is telling everyone they're destined for hell, they're destined for eternal torture. You know, you're sitting and you're listening to all of this, you don't really believe in it, you don't. But he then stops and he says, there's an evil spirit in the midst. And you tell yourself, sucks to be this guy. Who's the guy with the evil spirit? And then suddenly all the eyes are looking at you. It's almost as if they knew you had an evil spirit because nobody called your name, yet everyone is looking at you. And you realize, oh shucks, it's me. You would be preyed on and devils would be casted out of you. They would claim to be changing your life. And of course, this would work, right? This would work because people in the army are generally disconnected from family, they're disconnected from friends, and at any point, they could be stationed and sent away to fight in a war. And so that uncertainty mixed with loneliness causes them to fall in that trap. And this is how the house of prayer would gather a lot of its followers. And the reason why the Phantom targeted veterans is because they had a steady income. They had a propensity to follow orders. They also were very isolated from friends and family. And you know, that's one of the criteria for a cult, to isolate yourself from friends and family so that you're lonely, so that nobody could pull you up, nobody could check you, and the cult just has free reign over your mind. This was a very deliberate method of attacking persons who were lonely, who were isolated, who didn't readily have access to people around them that they love. And so they might have been going through some things. They were also uncertain about their future. And all of these are reasons why the Phantom, deliberately preyed on these men. He wanted a lot of veterans in his congregation for the purpose of siphoning their veterans benefits. And I think he got about $5.3 million out of these veteran benefits, besides the alleged real estate fraud, bank fraud, and wire fraud alleged in the indictment. So this is something completely different. How did this scam work? Well, first, you needed a veteran. You needed a young man who was in the army who felt lost, and he needed to be incorporated into the fold. He needed to be brought into the pack, and he needed to feel needed. Ex-member even commented that she moved from the NTCC and she met her husband in the new house of prayer of Church of Christ created by the Phantom, and she said that that's where she met her husband, who was an ex-military member. So his plan was to prey on veterans for as long as he lived, for as long as he existed, and I'm glad they caught him, right? So how did this scam work? Well, there is such a thing called the G.I. Bill. There are like multiple G.I. Bills. You have the post 9/11 G.I. Bill, you have the Montgomery G.I. Bill, and then you have the Montgomery G.I. Bill for special services. Those are the veteran benefits specifically for education that is offered by the state of Georgia that are specifically of relevance to this indictment, because there are more. But these are the specific veteran benefits that he benefited from. So these VI benefits would be a fund that the government would pay, or the government would set aside for people who have served in the military. And these veteran funds, education benefits, right, would be used so that the veteran, after they've served in the army, they would be able to go to school and to do some kind of course or further their education, right? Well, the organization had certain things to prove. So the organization would have to prove a couple things. So based on the judgment Department of Veteran Services would have specified. So one of the things that an organization needed to have, if they were to in fact get any government funds, is that if they were offering a school, if they were offering education, they had to have a school certifying official. The school certifying official would be exactly that. He would be in charge of writing up the specific form that he would then have to return to the Georgia Department of Veteran Service, where on this form, it would have essentially how long the veteran attended as a student, how many hours did he attend, how much time did he attend, how much classes he attended, did he go to all his classes, and if he graduated. Or if the student dropped out and they stopped coming, I believe that the money would have stopped at that point in time, because the student is no longer actively coming to class. So then this institution should not be requesting money. So they would encourage these veterans or these military guys to join this Bible school. And the Bible school would be the excuse that they would use to, one, inveigle these men to sign up, therefore getting the relevant information they need, could allegedly, as the indictment states, hack into their veteran benefits. The phantom needed to get into the veterans' minds to make them believe that they really wanted to do this. Because let's just start with the general fact that the school was not accredited. There are real theology schools out there, and I always tell people, do whatever you want. So I would not send anybody to theology school. I don't believe in that. But if you would like to go to theology school, go to theology school, meaning that people wherever you go who live your lifestyle and who value your same morals and values, when you present this certification to them, they should be able to say that they also value that type of certification, and you should be able to be employed. You should be able to do whatever you want, right? That's not the case, but they made it appear as if it was accredited. It wasn't just the veterans that came to this Bible school. It was actually almost everybody in the church. And a lot of people were very disappointed when they were ready to spread their wings and fly, I guess. And they realized after wasting decades in that cult that now that they're trying to apply the Bible school knowledge maybe to other churches, that they can't get work as a minister because, well, it's not accredited. So they kind of realized that they wasted decades of their life.
I mean, they took me out of the 9th grade and they gave me a fake diploma. So, I mean, I've been trying to join the military since I left. I have to go and get my GED before I can join because they gave me a fake diploma.
When you say fake diploma, what you mean?
The diploma is unaccredited. Basically, it's computer generated. It's fake.
But did you learn anything in school?
Not really. No.
Not everything from the books, they copyright them from the BJU. Everything is copyrighted. The school is mostly for control because Dennis has a polycom in the school too. So it's all for control. That the kids, we were told that the kids were never going to get a high school diploma. I took my son out when he was in the 5th grade. And when I got put out, he was in the 9th grade. My younger son had to repeat the 9th grade twice because House of Prayer would not give him the 2 credits that he earned in there. So the school is basically for control.
So these veterans would be brainwashed, manipulated to give this guy all of this personal information, likely write a letter stating, I want to be part of this world-changing Bible school. And he would then get access to the veteran benefits. Now, the scam comes in when you realize that a lot of these veterans never actually came to class, according to the indictment. Many of them did not graduate. Many of them stopped coming. I believe that they assumed that this organization, being a church, right, a house of prayer, would have been honest. That's what I believe. And they assumed that when they were a no-show, the student certifying official would have reported to the GDVS that they were no longer coming to class. But that didn't happen. They reported these veterans in these forms that they were going to give to the GDVS as though they were there. They came to class every day. They graduated even. And these veterans were nowhere to be found. They no longer were interested in the fake Bible school. Well, they kept taking the money and they didn't stop. And I believe that they created the Bible school in a way that it would have one completion of the course would not have left any remainder for the veteran to do anything else. That's what I suspect, because I'm placing myself in the shoes of a scammer. If I were a scammer and I was doing this type of scam, and I know that veterans have money to collect for education, but it's a scam, I would want to get the most I could get from that government fund. Meaning that I would calculate my courses. I would do everything so that by the time the veteran graduates, the fund would be completely done, completely dry. And that's what happened. They kept taking money. I am not going to touch on the bank fraud or the wire fraud, because I believe that we get the gist, or the real estate scams. We get the gist. He's a real dirty low down scammer. Like, that's his MO. I think some people, based on all my research that I've been doing thus far, they were put on this earth to be scammers at this point. Some people you could tell based on how they've lived life, that is the only thing their mind is set on doing. I think he was one of them. So it shouldn't surprise you. Besides the wire and bank fraud, we have tax evasion. So how did tax evasion come into this whole thing? Well, you see, there was a caveat to receiving government funds as a non-profit religious organization. The first thing was that, well, they had this school. In order for them to remain tax-free, the school had to only teach things that were related to religion, pastoring, etc., things like that. And that happened. But the second caveat was that they could not receive any government funding. And they were receiving government funding in the form of veterans' benefits. So they weren't supposed to receive the VA benefits if they wanted to remain a non-profit, tax-free religious organization. So they tried to have their cake and eat it too. As most scammers, as most criminals do, some point in time they're going to overreach and they're going to get caught. So we are going to talk about the ghosts with the unique and mysterious cult. And you really feel sad when you hear the cult members talk, because yes, this is not as dark as other cults, but cults are still cults. And this is why you need to caution everybody in your life who is very much involved in, seeking these religious places, to make sure that they are not using the socialized fear of God or fear of hell to get a one-up on them in this lifetime. Because I would think someone sitting down in the congregation looking at persona impersonating the deceased Rony Denis, they would look at him and they would think he's a real man of God, because he speaks with authority. He speaks like he knows what he's talking about, and he's extremely charismatic. So imagine the most charismatic preacher you could think of. That's what I imagine a service from Rony Denis would be like. And we would all have to imagine, because he did not allow any phones in the church. If they found you fiddling with your phone, they would literally escort you out. You did not have to be taking a picture. If they saw you turning off your phone, having your phone in your hand, they would literally escort you out of the building. Because around 2017, a couple of his ex-members actually did an interview, and what they said was very disturbing. So the Phantom would go on stage and he would say that he is the only man of God, and you can only get saved through him.
Do you think he can have that much influence over another human being? But I know you said Jim Jones, but how
because from the beginning, there was, from when the church that we split from, which was New Testament, and he started House of Prayer, there was no board. The board was God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Ghost, meaning that there was no accountability. He could do whatever he wants. So he started telling his people that he was this great man of God, and that he's the only man of God in the entire world, that nobody can get saved but through him, or if he calls your name. So everybody elevated him. People, I thought I was in a great church. I thought this was it, because they tell you, oh, if you're out there, you're in sin, your son is going to go into sin and all this. My son's been there since he was 6 years old.
So he would also send scouts out to the out to other churches. And I want you to realize, like, this guy, he always has an operation. He always has a mission going on. The first missions, some of the missions would be to recruit these soldiers and then set up a fake church environment in somebody's home to make these soldiers feel like something is wrong with them to join their cause. Then we hear right now another operation is that they would go into other churches. And when I first heard the interview, I thought, oh, he wants to like swindle members from other churches. Absolutely not. He is sending these people to other churches so that they could come back and tell the cult members that other churches are basically designed by Satan. And they're all gay for some reason. They have a gay spirit.
But for what he's done these last few years, when he realized he really had a grip on people, and he knew that those he didn't have a grip on, some of the other elders, he could just trash and get rid of, and he could still control everyone. He claims openly that they have sent people from the church, some of his henchmen, I call them, and have gone to visit every church in Hinesville, Liberty County, some in Long County, even into Savannah. They claim they visited over 500 churches. They will come back, and on Sunday night, those who visited, he will have them stand and testify what they saw. And those who saw it, they have to stand up, oh yeah, all the churches are gay. Everyone is gay. We went to this one church, there's a gay pastor. Every church in Hinesville is gay. All the pastors are gay. He says that if you leave his church, the gay spirit, the homosexual spirit will get on you and you will become a reprobate.
Okay. Have any of you...
They have a gay spirit, and essentially, and of course, you know, don't ever think there's anything out there for you. That's essentially what he was saying. Don't ever think that there's anything else out there for you. We are the chosen one. We are the chosen few. 5D, I'm a 5D person and I could shapeshift. It's always that the cult leader is supreme. One of the things I found interesting about this persona in the name of Rony Denis was that he was very calculating, and that shows again when we see that he has been doing this for over maybe like 2 decades now, and he did not push for the growth of his church. Unlike David E. Taylor, he settled into a niche and he locked into that specific niche, and he was happy benefiting and gleaning from that niche with a specific profit. He knew that if he expanded, yes, he would likely get more money, but he would have also opened up the risk of not having as much control as he had. Remember how I said he doesn't want phones? If you have a place full of 1,000+ people, then you are not going to be able to check everybody's phones. You understand? One of those doctrines would have been the ability that he had to divorce people as well as marry people. So he would arrange marriages and divorces within his church. This is nothing new. Cults tend to do that because it's a form of control. They're going to break you up and marry you again to somebody who is even more indoctrinated to make sure that you are just as indoctrinated as this person. So that's what he would do. He also would point to children with their parents and tell them that I want him. Excuse me? Yeah, he would point to people's children and say, I need him. Are you willing to give him up? And parents at the time didn't mind it because they believed this guy was a special prophet. They believed everything that he said, to the point where these parents would take their children out of school. They would take them out of school to appease this man so that the children would grow up in the ways of God, apparently. And one of the ex-cult members, they had said in the interview that, well, he woke up from the spell and he started speaking up about the persona, the ghost, the phantom, and all the things he had going on in this church. And well, Of course, when he left the church, he thought his wife was coming with him, and she stayed. Of course, the brainwashing was really deep into her head. It went deep down in there, and she didn't come with him. And while they were going through the divorce proceedings, they were leaving the court, and outside of the court, there was, let me see what he said. So there was Gerard Robinson, Jeff Derby, his son-in-law, and his daughter-in-law all standing up on the wall, essentially trying to intimidate him. So they literally left. They came to the courthouse, and they lined up by his car to intimidate him.
I've gone through a divorce.
Right.
Because of Rony Denis told my wife to kick me out. I've done all I could to fight it. One time we were in Savannah at mediation for the divorce. I never saw my wife. She was in another room with her lawyer. I was in with my lawyer. There was a mediator, another lawyer. And I had to go to my car, and I saw some of them out there. So when I came back and it was all done, I asked my lawyer to walk with me to my car. I said, because they're out there. Dennis had Gerard Robertson, who's one of the head pastors there now. Jeff Derby is one of his main henchmen. Okay? My son, my daughter-in-law, and my grandson. They were parked by my car, and they were all standing against the wall. On hopcc.com, you can see pictures of them. And my lawyer, he said, I can't believe this. They were all standing by my car to intimidate me. Okay? And my lawyer...
Mr. Andrew Lawson, who is one of the ex-members, he states that everything is monitored. He had a very special position. From what he describes it, he was one of the caddies. He was somebody who would help around the multiple mansions, because the Phantom owned 3 mansions, by the way. He wouldn't just help the Phantom. He was generally a really nice person. Like, his respect, his helpfulness did not stop at the supposed cult leader. It actually extended to everybody and anybody in the church. And basically, he realized that he was being monitored. Now, I don't know if everybody is being monitored in the church, but there's this psychological effect where if you design a psychological system to make people believe that they're being monitored, they will act as if they're being monitored because they believe they're being monitored, even though you do not have the time of day to give them and nobody's watching them. I know some prisons are built like that, but he said specifically, and I believe because of how in-depth he was in cleaning and just being a fixer-upper in the Phantom's 3 mansions, he was not exactly in the hierarchy of the upper echelon of the cult who would make decisions and knew all of the crazy stuff that was going on with the scamming and all of that. But he was not necessarily just an ordinary cult member. You understand what I mean? His proximity, even if it was just sweeping the floor, his proximity to the intimate sides of the Phantom, which would be inside his home, by nature of that would have made him a big security threat if he were to ever leave. If he weren't monitored, because who knows what evidence the Phantom had in those mansions. And on his escape from the cult, he said he had to pack a little doggy bag to go, like a small backpack, and he had to hide it in the back of a truck. He said that he had to do that because if he didn't, they would ask him questions about this bag, and I guess they would stop him.
And I had to hide the backpack going to work because if they would have saw it, they would ask me questions. And I called my mom. Whenever I called my mom, my phone cut off 3 times. In the process of me calling my mom, I'm pretty sure they have my phone tapped. And then I asked my mom, and my mom said Gladys is going to pick me up. And I ran to her truck because I knew at any moment House Spirit could pull up and try to get me to not get in her car by whatever means.
So you didn't have no free space, like to go to Burger King or Pizza Hut?
Everywhere you go in that church, there has to be another person with you. It's called a battle buddy system. So if you do something wrong, say you look a certain way, or you look at a woman, or a lady says hi to you, or anything like that, they go back and they tell the pastor on you. Or like if Gladys had tried to say hi to me before I left, they would have ran and told the pastor. And then the pastor would have...
Even his ex-wife Marjorie, she claimed in her... She claimed in the restraining order that she wanted to have against him that he came and he restrained her and someone else, I think, at one point in time. For whatever reason, which is crazy. So he would restrain people. He was really violent. Some people accuse him of even lashing them and encouraging parents of young children to hit them when he was just having a bad day. But beyond that, he would call them civil soldiers. I guess, which makes sense because they are following his orders. And I think one of the things that I observed about this whole thing, it was almost as if everyone was in fact mindless robots. Kind of how the military makes soldiers follow instructions and ask questions later, if at all. That's how he ran his church, which is interesting. He was in the military for some time. He targets veterans because he knows they're prone to following instructions. So it makes me think that he absorbed some of the critical psychological programming that the military does to make soldiers efficient soldiers. And she just applied that to the church using the psychological weaknesses that would have attracted a certain group of people, and he just applied it to those people. So essentially everybody was in fact one of his soldiers, and it's just interesting that he would call them that to their face, knowing that he is consciously programming them to be mindless individuals. One of the disturbing things that I found out when I was researching from one of the ex-cult members is that he had the ministry houses were houses where they had their people living, like some of their congregation members, and the congregation members would obviously pay rent. Now, the thing is that they would rent the houses to the congregation members, meaning that they would all in all be a tenant, right? But the congregation member themselves did not sign the lease, which means that even though they are paying rent, their name is not on the lease. And that was because the ghost of Rony Denis would tell them where to live. He'd tell them where to live. They'd go live in a house that he owns, but the lease would be signed by someone else who is even more in control, but who he has even more in control. And so even though these congregation members would be paying rent and everything like that, he had control over them, because if they decided to question even anything that he had to say, they would be evicted. We hear so many things. We hear so many things from these ex-cult members where Rony Denis would line people up before they go into his home for some service, and he would make them drink a special substance. And the special substance, he wouldn't tell them what it is. Nobody knew what it is. But if Rony came out in a black robe holding a jug of Kool-Aid in his hand, you would be instructed to drink it, and you couldn't. Sorry. It just bothers me that people do not ask questions. How do you mean you're seeing something that's Jamestown-esque repeating itself and you're just drinking? Because what? What has this man promised you? And I think that is what is very scary about a lot of these cults, is that they really prey on people's fear of maybe hell, or fear of poverty, or fear of being rejected, or fear of never finding love, and all of these things, so that they could really control these individuals. But how do you mean somebody's giving you a cup of tea, a cup of water, a cup of something, and you are just drinking it without asking any questions? That is just so insane. But That is what they did because they trusted this man. This man was almost like their god. And one of the creepy things about all of this is that he was in love and infatuated, according to one of his ex-cult members, with a Jim Jones. He loved that man. He would always reference Jim Jones in his sermons, and it would come across as if, I'm not Jim Jones. Don't worry about me. I'm not Jim Jones. But it would almost be like, why are you so obsessed with something? And I always say this, like, when people are so adamant against certain things, they definitely do, in fact, partake in it, and they do, in fact, believe it. No matter, even if it seemed as though he was utterly against it, I believe that he was very much infatuated, and he loved the idea of control. He loved the idea of, at least he loved for the minimum, the idea of control over a population, like what Jim Jones had done. And it's suspicious that he would often bring it up because maybe he is taking a lot of his ideas and the way he controls people from how Jim Jones structured his own cult.
This is a modern day Jim Jones cult. Rony Denis is infatuated with Jim Jones. He has passed propaganda in the church because we have done rallies. Me and my friend Janessa, when we got out, we have done rallies in front of the church, exposing the church of everything fraudulent, from the fraudulent day school, the fraudulent Bible college, the houses, the real estate fraud. We have done rallies, and the man, Rony Denis, is infatuated with Jim Jones. He has a polycom, which is a PA system in all of the churches, where he communicates. He could be in one of his beach houses in Florida, and he calls in the church, and everybody just have to be there listening to this man. He has actually, because we have called him Jim Jones, he has actually passed around propaganda of Jim Jones, and he has told his members, oh, those ladies out there, they call me Jim Jones. I'm not Jim Jones. I'm not going to execute you.
So the ex-cult members would go to the sheriff and they would say, please, 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 please investigate this man, because this is giving Jonestown. He is giving people things to drink and nobody could question what exactly is in the Kool-Aid cup. Like, what exactly is in the mug. Please investigate it. And for whatever reason, the sheriff department didn't really take it seriously enough, according to the ex-cult members. Well, in the interview, a man called Mr. Bobby Wright, he was also an ex-cult member, and he comes in and he tells all. He believes that the ghost actually has so much money that he has bribed the sheriff's department.
He may be even better than Jim Jones. It is a with his power and the money he has. A mob, this is what a mob is. People don't understand. The definition of a mob is a person with money and power to affect change in anything that they stand. When a group of people come together with money and power, that is a mob. He has completed he has moved beyond the mob with the money he has and the contacts he got, and he has his money hidden very well. He, in my opinion, he maybe got offshore accounts or something, but he has his money hidden very well, and he got plenty of it. And the FBI, now I hate to say it, but the FBI knows this.
And he believes that the Phantom had enough money to buy out the entire sheriff department, and basically he has them right in the palm of his hands. And Mr. Bobby Wright specifically brings up one example when he says that he thinks that the sheriff department should have done something, but they didn't, and that's what makes him believe plainly that they may have been bought out. It makes sense. You own the police, you have all this power, multiple people with power come together. Essentially, it's a mob. And he believes that Rony Denis has that type of power. And that's the reason why the sheriff department, for all these decades, after all of these complaints, never arrested him. So September the 11th, 2025 was his first court appearance, and there was drama in the courtroom. So apparently 100 cult members gathered around the Augusta courthouse. basically showing support of their cult leader. And it was during almost to the end of the proceedings, the judge called 6 people up to the front. Now, he asked these people, how did they get into this courtroom? Did they represent themselves to be legal staff? They said no, they didn't represent them to be legal staff, but they were in fact supporting their cult leader. So these were 6 members, likely high up in the cult, who lied and fraudulently represented themselves as staff in the courthouse in order to get in. They said staff. I think at that point in time, the judge just has it, and he says, and he says, does anyone of you have any recording device? And surprisingly, one of them says yes, and he pulls out a pen, and on the edge of the pen there is this camera, and it's recording everything that has been going on in the courtroom. When much like Rony Davis's church, they should have respected not having phones. All of a sudden now you're scared to not have phones, but you were okay with Rony Davis, the alleged scammer. He showed the judge the pen, and the judge said that this reeks of dishonesty, and they basically were kicked out of the courtroom. I really do put in a lot of work for these videos. Whew. So I'm glad that you guys are enjoying it, and I hope that you get busy in the comments and you tell me what you think of this man, if you know anything about this man, if I missed anything. Likely not. And that's the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching.